Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the High Soapbox, and today it is a very, very special episode. I am joined by Mr. Tank the Target, or just Target for short in this instance. He is a Twitch streamer with a growing following, and I met him as we were just throwing our heads against a wall at bosses in a vet dungeon on Elder Scrolls Online, specifically Mars of Sacrifices, which was just interesting. But this is a but this is a very special episode for our audio listeners because good news. We have a we are currently streaming this with to Target's audience as we speak. And for those of you interested in watching Target play a little ESO while we have this podcast, they're coming the same day this releases on our podcasting platform. It's going to be on YouTube at our YouTube channel. Keep a lookout for that. But then again, we're recording this a week later, so there's a bit of a time delay. So ain't that interesting? I guess that's what happens when you do things live. So we're going to just be treating it as opposed to, like I said, for our audio listeners and our YouTube listeners and watchers, we're going to be talking deliberately as if we're live right now, just to make it easier on the streamers, and that's why I wanted to give a little bit of context beforehand. So, Target, how are you?
Doing pretty good, and yourself?
Good. So, we had a little bit of a preliminary discussion beforehand, and despite being quite the DPS and tank in ESO, you're Florida born, but not necessarily Florida raised.
That
Where did so where are you where did you before you came back to Florida? Where are you originally from?
depends on how you want to look at it. I've lived in Nashville, Tennessee for a good 8-9 years,
Good
and
food, good music all around.
and then Indianapolis, Indiana for another 12 years following that.
Interesting. So if just to ask again, what is your so before you started being a Twitch streamer, what was your profession?
I've been mostly a plumber for the majority of time that from graduating high school till probably about this year. Done some other construction work in between there as well, but predominantly a plumber and a welder.
Did you enjoy it?
For the most part, there are times when, of course, days aren't as great as you'd like them to be, but they've been pretty decent.
And clients think they know everything.
Well, in most of mine, it would end up being along the lines of industrial and commercial. A few times, when I first started off, during high school, it was residential, but leaned more into light commercial following that, and then into commercial and industrial usage.
Interesting. Nice. So what made you start doing the streaming bit of ESO?
Probably 3 or 4 different things converging at once. I had been a tank previous in other games and had been doing so for a long time. And in ESO, I found that there were many people who had some things that they wanted to learn but weren't able to figure out how to get that information, or it wasn't conveyed in a way that was easily accessible for them to actually get a hold of. And so I was like, all right, like I understand game mechanics from a different standpoint than most others. Because most of the time you don't have tanks going out and doing something. But in understanding that mechanic and how it approaches, whether you're healing or whether you're DPSing or whether you're providing support for an entire group, what are the most important factors based on the rules of the game that you're abiding by. And so my brother has been playing since launch, and
Bless his heart.
and I was like, well, let me do it for those who have not had a chance to, and then go from there. Because I haven't played since launch, but I understand where the game is now.
Right, right. So, how does ESO tanking, like, obviously it is very different in some certain in a lot of ways from something like WoW, but how is ESO tanking different? Like, given all the MMOs you played, like, let's just list those first. List the MMOs you've played over the course of your life.
Mostly Diablo and WoW. For WoW, the reason why I played that the longest time was because I ran my own guild while I was there. And so that took up the majority of my time, and most of the other places didn't support a full role tank that could do alternate things in the process.
Right.
And so before that, it was Diablo, and I do mean the original Diablo, and then two, and then I kind of from two slid into WoW as it started off, and moved into the Paladin role from Diablo 2 into the Paladin role in World of
Even though
Warcraft.
Warrior was an objectively better tank.
Yes, because I've played in ways that are slightly different than the usual thought process of a tank. And
It must have been so damn hard for you to get into a raid group. I can only imagine.
there were times, but at the same time, I was the type of tank that would go and at that point in time go up to the hinterlands at level 20 and go fight the level 30 or Orethia Highlands, the level 30 mobs, and spend 15, 20 minutes to kill one, and then
But but you
move.
get stupid amount of XP for doing so.
Well, at that point in time, when things were still active, there's only two classes that can kill anything, and if they can't kill it, it can't be killed, and that was an Affliction Warlock or a Prot Paladin. And so I was the Prot Paladin, and I knew how to work my abilities to my benefit to stay alive, and I did a very good job of that. Doesn't mean I didn't have other classes, but that was the majority of the roles that I played, even when I had other classes afterwards. That includes my Death Knight over there, and um, in essence, in weird ways, my Discipline Priest. So that's kind of where my start was and where I lean to. Yes, most people did take just warriors to things, and my a lot of those guilds are not completely still there anymore, which is sad to hear. The one I started is actually still up and running with some of the original, well, not the original members, but some of the first members that I got.
And what happened to
Roughly,
you as being guild leader? Did you just pass it on to somebody with more time?
I did pass it on to somebody with more time. Um, Rueth, who happens to was the queen of the guild at that point in time. She's
Oh
taken over
Lord,
and been running since then.
bless her heart. Do you think if you ever decided to go back, you might have a place as like an officer or something?
Um, even though
Or did you burn that bridge?
no, I did not burn that bridge. The statement was if I wanted to come back and take over, take back my guild that I could. I said no, like I've passed it on to somebody else to work with. She's learned enough from the various experiences that occurred from like understanding how new players come in, how new people come in who are experienced players, what they're looking for, what they may not be looking for. Uh, she leaned it. She leans more towards the running the market end of stuff in the auction house, and
keeping the guild drowning in gold.
yes, and I didn't mind that at all. There were a few times we controlled the prices in the auction house on our server.
What was your guild's name?
Horde's Nightmare.
So you were an alliance side.
I was Alliance side.
Got it. Because a lot of my friends most of the people I know who play WoW, who've been playing WoW for years and years and years, play
Mhm.
Horde.
They do, and that was probably one of the funniest things when I went to a GameStop at a midnight launch and was standing in line, and most everybody was looking at me and were like, "You play Alliance, but you're not a 12-year-old." I was like, "No, that's why I'm actually your nightmare."
Oh boy. Oh man. Oh boy. But just to bring things to a more serious side for a moment.
hmm
What are your thoughts about Blizzard recently? You know what I'm
Uh,
referring to.
oh yes, I do, and I
Before you continue, shameless plug. Just so everybody listening on stream, listening on the watching on stream, listening on the podcast, or watching on YouTube, if you are just as disgusted as we are with Blizzard's behavior in bending to a authoritarian regime, if you go to himediamarketplace.com/collection/trollolo/products/cbt, or check the link in the description of the podcast in the YouTube video, you will be able to buy yourself your very own Kami Blizzard tee, which features the Blizzard Entertainment logo surrounded by the iconic 4 stars of a Kami flag. Wear it to BlizzCon and show exactly what you think about them degrading free speech. I apologize for the shameless plug. Target, please continue.
I
I will send you a link to that so you can giggle at it too.
well, that's fine. My thought is that the issue is a lot more nuanced than my consideration had originally led me to think. And like,
Definitely.
don't get me wrong. Like, I still am not the fan of the situation and how it unfolds.
I mean, yeah,
The
China has 6 times the amount of active gamers in their population than we do. They have 600
oh yeah, that but
versus America's 100.
that wasn't my. That's not the reason why I say that. One of the things that was brought up by Bel Air Gaming was something that I had not considered. And I went, that does actually cause me to go, how do you actually handle it when you're this far in? Which was, we have to remember that Blizzard, because they are in China, do have Chinese employees. And so, what happens if they decide to allow things that are contradictory to a government that does not want dissension to employees that work for a company that allows dissension? And that was a thought I had not considered. And he didn't necessarily spell it out that way. But I was like, that's a issue that I had not considered, is because now you, as if you are leading your company, you're responsible for the people that you have, even if they're in another country.
Right.
And as running a guild before, there was a point in time where I could actually say that the sun never set on the Horde's Nightmare Empire. The idea that I personally believe that Spider-Man's Uncle Ben's statement is the most misquoted statement. Even though it is quoted correctly, it is the most misspoken statement. It is not with great power comes great responsibility. It is with great responsibility that great power comes. And to jokingly reference it, it is the one thing that we actually talk about the most about Spider-Man. And it is his response ability due to his spider senses tingling that gives him his greatest power. He is able to respond to things because he has the ability to respond to them. And in the case of Active Blizz, and I say that because most of the original Blizzard employees that were there are no longer there. Activision's portion of it looks at things and considers we have an obligation to our shareholders. The shareholders, unfortunately, the greatest majority of them are not the gamers.
No.
We may be stakeholders, but we are not shareholders. And according to U.S. law, they are responsible to the shareholders for ensuring that they increase market and market value. If they do not, they can legally be ripped of their company by the shareholders. So if the shareholders say that they must go do work in China, they must go do work in China. But
that means that would mean a majority of shareholders, larger than the controlling, than the people who control, the people who control the company in terms of working their day to day. That means enough shareholders who collectively hold more power, a higher percentage than the people who are working at the company would have to dictate that. So if only 30% of the people of shares in it are it's part of the reason why multi-million-dollar companies and stuff buy back shares. They take their profits and do buybacks. It's because when they do those buybacks, they are able to not be so they're not basically enslaved to shareholders. It's I don't give certain companies I think are awful and are just scummy, but others I understand they have to do what they do, even though they know it's hurting them long term. The gaming is a prime example of that. Shareholders don't give a shit about how consumers view games and shit, and if they want to buy or not. They just care that they make money, and outside of that, they don't care about the repercussions.
They do care about the repercussions, but,
right,
it's a cost versus
gain.
Benefits. Gain would be one, but cost versus benefits. And the idea is we can say that we're their market, and we are. We are their market. The idea is, though, that in China, there are more millionaires being made on a daily basis than there is in the U.S. or the rest of the world.
Yeah.
These are actual facts. As somebody who says, okay, yes, I do believe in the facts. I do believe in the understanding of it. the idea becomes, all right, the fact is that they have a market, and then like this is where like even my play in Diablo comes in, that they want to move into the mobile gaming market because that's where it is in that country. That is the largest portion of where they can draw the biggest amount of money. Everybody may not have access to a computer, but they do have access to a cell phone. Now, do I, as the meme said, do you all not have phones? Um, the idea, as beneficial as it is, may also come to bite them in the rear because China is also enacting the fact that any new phones that are purchased that are smartphones have to actually have a picture with facial recognition and everything else so they can socially score their people based on their usage of their phone. And so that becomes something that is of consideration when you're going, well, we want to move into the mobile market. But when your mobile market is now the tracking device of whether people speak freely on something or don't,
Yeah.
becomes a very big issue. But as we say that about China, then we have to look at the EU for the same issue.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, Britain has thrown
No,
people in prison for things like the Count Dankula is considered a martyr for free speech.
not just Britain. When I say EU, I
The
do mean the
entirety of it.
the
Yeah, I know.
EU, because they just had a court ruling that said that all social medias, if any country in the EU says that what's being posted online is not truthful, that they have to remove it from the social platform worldwide. That's from the highest court in the EU. There's no place else to appeal it to. That just happened either last week, I think, is what it is.
I could have sworn that happened like a month ago.
It went to court probably about a month ago, but they handed down the verdict, and the verdict, that's the conditions of the verdict as well, is the fact that they have to remove it worldwide. Like it can't be anywhere in the world. So that does affect Facebook, that affects Twitter, that affects um, uh, what is it? Not MySpace, for those who may even still use it. Instagram, any of the social platforms. And the reason why that is something that some have gone, well, that's an issue because which country is it? One of the countries that does that is not part of the EU, but a lot of people from the European Union go there. Does that in their country as they go, well, this isn't truth, and so there's no way to say that it is or isn't, or that it isn't true, and so they black it out in that country. And you can understand like if it's inside their borders, but then that means that if someone, I was going to say they just had a soccer game. The English just went and played soccer somewhere, and they were very appalled at the fact of how that country's stadium treated one of the players, and were pretty much like had to eject half the stadium out of the game. Otherwise, the game was going to have to stop. And they were going because they came across and did an audible warning to the audience for their actions towards the person, and by making certain hand gestures and noises, and then and like that's recently just happened, by the way, and then the both teams went back to their locker rooms, and if it had continued beyond that, the game would have been called. And so if that country decided that they were going to say that that's the truth, and anybody saying anything differently is incorrect, and they want it banned, that presents issues worldwide. That causes issues even for me here in America.
Yeah, it does.
And so the idea is we are operating in a global market.
Mm-hmm.
No country lives or dies to itself.
This is true.
So how do we deal with the fact of understanding that there are people that we want to help and protect
Mm-hmm.
without forcing our values upon that country, but also not having that country force its values upon us?
Well, I think for us it's relatively easy because like we can do it. It's just the people in power just don't.
Well,
And
like
I and but the thing
the
is,
idea is though that we're talking about, like, we consider ourselves a superpower, which we are.
Mhm.
Russia is considered a superpower, which they are.
not they're a regional power. They're not a superpower
They are
overall.
superpower by the fact of the energy available to them from nuclear weapons.
And this is actually, yeah, you're right. I'll give you that.
They're a superpower. China isn't necessarily in that range, but it is an economic power. Like if we talk about why Jason Statham and The Rock are pretty big in China, they are at Lionsgate. Lionsgate is mostly owned by
Right.
Chinese companies. How much of Hollywood, if we talk about Disney doing the Avengers, they had to work with the Chinese government to make sure that it made its way overseas and got into the government, because there's only a certain amount of allotted foreign films that are allowed in China per year, which opened up the market for the Marvel films being $1 billion in the $1 billion club.
Yeah.
And so now you're like playing against the fact that resource capability. What does China have? China has people. They have an actual economic impact to the global world. If we say that that China says they're not going to buy soybeans from us, then they go to another country and buy soybeans.
Right.
Like soy sauce and tofu.
Yeah.
You've got these are two of the things, and this is where you go, okay, well, let's talk about America. Soy sauce and soybeans. Yeah, that's not going over very well. Well, what other countries? Not too many others.
Japan certainly is one.
Yes, but it doesn't have the number of people. And that's why the issue of their declining population is an issue for the Japanese government.
China has the same kind of issue, but it's like Japan and China are both prime examples of why like they're both of their declining populations are both show the glaring problems in a truly laissez-faire in a more laissez-faire kind of capitalist system versus a communist socialist system. and both of those are examples of what happens when you let the flaws of both of those systems just flourish. Because because China had the one child policy, and
Yes.
and you have an entire generation of people who either don't want to have kids or only one or just fine only having one. They don't see the need to have more than one. And for Japan's case, men and women have to work so goddamn much to afford to live anywhere in the goddamn country that they just don't have the time. That they just don't have the time, desire, or like they barely have time to go out after work and drink and relax a little bit. They just go home and sleep and
I
die.
I understand what you're saying, and I
Yeah.
would say that your assumption, that your view view on what the symptoms are, is that seeing the symptoms is correct. I
I
like
understand that
one,
they're deeper than that, but it's like it's just
I would like to argue a different idea
go ahead.
because it affects us here in the US as well. Japan is heavily automated.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
And so, like, you can go to a vending machine and get a meal, like an actually decent meal, or it's something, not just drinks and whatever else. And they have, I forget what their capable of vending machines per person is, but it's the highest out of every country in the globe.
Makes you wonder how they make any money.
They make the money from the vending machine. Now,
So the vending machines, how makes you wonder how the vending machines make their money. I mean, it's such a
uh,
high
because the idea is you now don't have to pay a human person to be there to man the cash register.
and that cuts back on the any loss you have by just having the oversaturation.
Hmm.
Mm.
Now,
I would
here,
wait. I'm gonna guess that you're hashtag Yang Gang, Mr. Target.
no, I am not. I am. I do fall somewhere between Bernie, Yang, and Warren. Like I'm somewhere in the middle of that, and like we can go into why I'm in the middle of that, and not. I do lean more to one candidate than the others, but why that is in a moment. But the other reason why the factor of saying automation is the issue is we have to understand what China tries to do on the most part by uniforming as much as possible the number of people that you have. That is, in essence, a form of automation.
Mm.
And when you actually do that, it becomes harder and harder because you can get the same thing everywhere for you to make money if it's not something that everybody is going to get. Or when you do make something that everyone's going to get, you make a millionaire.
Mm.
Now, how does that affect us here at home in the US? The argument that we fall into on a large basis is the fact that automation has taken away many of the manufacturing jobs that we have here.
True.
As a result, that's what causes the underlying issue for a lot of the distress and um, agitation because those factory jobs are no longer there.
Right.
As a whole, on the worldwide scale, every country is actually in decline on the number of births that are occurring. It's not just Japan. It's not just China, but it's more poignant in Japan because they have a smaller number. And
Right.
so the having losing the same percentage is actually a bigger hit to them. And so it continues to cascade.
Right.
the cost of rearing a child is still a cost of rearing a child.
And the one thing I say to people is like uh, whenever you decide to do something like get a mortgage, buying a house,
Mm,
buying a lot of I try to just dip into finance for a second. I try to not do anything or get any kind of payment burden whatever or anything or
mm,
that doesn't have potential or certainly guaranteed or close to guaranteed tangible ways for that money to make more money off itself. Things like real estate and stocks and bonds and stuff like that. A kid,
but
things like a mortgage, things and especially a child,
mhm,
you're just sinking money into that. And especially a kid. A kid has no perceived. I made a mistake. I love kids, but I'm 21. I want to be a dad someday, but God, not now, because at the end of the day, it costs a $500,000, $500,000 to raise a kid for over the course of 18 years, not accounting for inflation whatsoever.
that would be partially true. And the reason why I say that would be partially true is because what we assume that the child needs now versus what a child actually needs are two different things.
This is true.
So, we could say that a child needs food, clothing, and shelter, basic necessities. The government requires that the child has education.
Hmm.
As someone who has been in, and not because of disciplinary issues, public school, private school, church school, and homeschooled, I can tell you that each one of them has their benefits. Each one of them has their drawbacks.
Hmm.
The
Were you an
idea,
army? Were you an army brat?
I was not an army brat, and because that's usually the next question people ask me. It had a very interesting upbringing. That is why my responses are a little bit more nuanced than other people.
Fair enough.
Um, the idea is that when you go about realizing that you can homeschool your child, you can teach them very well how to handle some things.
But they lose the social aspect.
They can, doesn't mean they
They
will.
will, especially if they have external activities like rec league or choir or things like that.
If they're going about, or if they're, even if you decide to take your child out, not just to a library, but maybe to musical concerts. If you teach them to read the crowd instead of the artist, that teaches them social cues as to what people do when the light isn't on them.
Mm.
There are ways to approach understanding that are different than what our structured understanding is. The reason we have structured learning is because we realized that there were far too many people who did not know how to educate because they not only did not have the information themselves to know that leeches would not cure you, but the idea to understand that how to convey that information.
And most importantly, the a maturity to accept that maybe what you've believed for all these years is wrong.
Mm-hmm. Or, and here's the what I usually find the kicker, and it can be and or how to convey that truth is truth, but the same truth doesn't always remain the same truth. Because as variables change, what may be true doesn't mean that it always is. If I say that there is steam, if I change the variable of heat, it may be ice.
Interesting.
And so it may be true that it is water, but the form that it takes as water is whether it is a solid, liquid, or gas. And it is when water is under standard temperature and pressure, STP, it is a liquid. But that standard pressure, temperature, and pressure is based on what we consider standard. What would be standard on the moon would be something completely different. It is true, and this is why we look for ice on Mars, that its standard there would be different. And so for our approaches, if you're teaching someone to read the variables and determine the outcome, not just to accept that this is one truth and it will always be the truth, and this truth will never change, but under what conditions it is true. Under what conditions is it untrue? Because I could say that having a line of credit is a great thing to have, but there are conditions under which that is a total fallacy. And so understanding that allows you not to be hoodwinked by the idea that it's good or that it's bad, but to know under what conditions is it efficient for you to use. And so that changes also the authoritative mindset of many dictators in the fact that they're like, this is a truth, it's always true. No. Just because something is true does not mean that it is always true.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things while I was going to college and having a conversation with a lady who was approaching her retirement years.
So you're being very kind right now.
That's fine. And we were having a discussion.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We had a itty bitty tiny little technical issue here. Thing cut out, but luckily it quit right at the time when we were supposed to do a commercial break anyhow. So, thank you for listening thus far, and please enjoy your commercial break. And we appreciate you supporting High Media.
And we are back from our abrupt, buggy commercial break. So, as you were saying, Target, I apologize. You were cut off, unfortunately.
Not a problem. I was mentioning the fact of having a conversation at a college while I was at college with a woman who is approaching retirement age, and we were discussing the fact of how I approach things a little bit differently than other people. And she's like, you do come in quite authoritative. Like, she's like, in a good way, like, people willing to follow you, do yes. But I said, like, there are issues with different things of how I approach things. And she's like, well, yes, you have to come in, like, assuming that you know what's best and that's the right thing and what's the right thing to do. And I said, no, that's not the way I come in. And she's like, no, like, that's how I come in. I was like, that's the problem, though. That's the difference between you and me. because I want to follow more in the lines of a true scientist. And a true scientist always questions himself because they always question whether the assumed information is correct. And so I never actually come in assuming that I'm right. I come in assuming that I can figure out what is right or what is best for that given situation. Because I can actually sit down and get the information from all the different areas and cross-reference it and then go, this is the decision I want to make. And I can say, like, these are the options and make a decision from that point forward. But I never assume that I am 100% correct all the time. If scientists who make discoveries believed that, we would never have semiconductors, which means we would never have computers. They would assume that a ceramic never conducts electricity. But knowing that under certain conditions it can, changes your approach to the situation, and that is assuming that the information you have may not be 100% correct.
But you also have to remember at the same time, people are rather prideful. There's something in humans that just make it difficult for us to accept we're wrong. It's part of the reason that why like people are able to like say, like when a scientist says I can say this with beyond a reasonable doubt, when a scientist means by saying that is I am as sure
as I can be.
I'm as sure as this about this that I am sure that when you walk outside you are not going to run into to Elvis Presley. You know,
when they say that, actually what they mean is I am as sure as I can possibly be.
Right, but because being a scientist you have to be a little humble. You can't there could always be something that could prove you wrong because that's what science is.
Yes, but in understanding that, and this is where like the rest of the information lays out, is that generally they will do 6 standard deviations of what they're doing. And so this is something that most people don't realize, is that as they're doing something and they're running tests changing only one factor. They have to have at least 6 standardized deviations to be like, this is reasonably the case. Where they changed the factor in 6 different ways, that this outcome still stays the same. Then they go through, keep everything the same, change a different factor. Then go back through, go again, and change a different factor. And so they do this at least 6 times to have 6 standardized deviations to approach a situation, to see how far it holds true, and at what point does the data start skewing a bit. And then once you see the skew, if you start to see a skew, like if there's no effect, there's no effect. But if you start to see a skew, then you can go, all right, let's run this test further out to these changes of extremes to see if it actually has a reasonable difference in what's going on. And so when they come and say, hey, this is what is going on right now, this is what I assume is the answer, and this is what my belief is beyond as far as I know, beyond a reasonable doubt, it is that they take that information and then they publish it in a scientific journal, a reputable scientific journal. And there's cases made up for that as well. Because they publish it, but it's published so that their peers can review it.
Right, but you know the one thing that's always bothered me about scientific journals is that like the people who published it, like the people who did the research, they don't get a single cent. It only goes to the publishers.
Yes, but that's part of the reason why, generally speaking, from an American standpoint, we try to run grants for our scientists.
Right. Because
And
keeping money out of the process as much as possible is important. It's part of the reason why, like, whenever I see a scientific study that says climate change is false, and it was sponsored by the American Petrol Institute, I'm just like
but
what am I supposed to take from that?
here's the trick. The trick is, what publication was it published in? And that's why that is the key distinguishing factor. Because if you're asking for something that was published from UCLA or something that was published from NYU or something that was published from Cambridge, you need to find what magazine it goes into. Because they're not.
Will determine what is legit and what is not.
And this is how corporations get around it, because they start their own magazine.
Right. And so the magazine publications are where you got to look to see if they're legit or not.
Yes. And so this is why when you start asking colleges, like, what scientific publications do you publish to? Those become the standardized. Those are actually ones, because they will not admit the ones from corporations, because the specifications of the study must meet a certain level of requirement, and they don't meet those levels. Just like me saying 6 standardized deviations. Like, there are certain specifics that they have to meet in order for it to be considered worthy of notoriety in their publications for someone who may be a German physicist to go and, like, let me try this out, and someone who may be in California and be a physicist and be like, let me test this out as well. And so now you're talking about, where do the true scientists get their information from? And so that determines the legitimacy of the information that's provided. Whether chocolate is good for you or whether chocolate is bad for you. Well, whose publication did it come from? These become some of the questions. If I start saying, okay, I would like to go work out at the gym, but I want to get the best out of my workouts, do I go to someone who is a expert, or do I go to a biologist? Because then when I'm starting to go to a biologist, they can tell me what actually happens to the body under certain conditions. They can tell me at what points things break and at what point things repair. They can tell me how long it takes for new blood vessels to be formed in certain areas, capillaries to be formed. They can tell me about how much oxygen is actually carried by the blood and what rate you'd have to increase things by. So you start going, do I look at men's health and fitness, or do I go look at a biological study from I was going to say Sweden, but like Germany, because most of the Swedes actually go down to Germany for their college education.
Because in Germany you can pay $200 and you're good. There's college.
And this is their understanding of this is what it is. Now,
Well, I
here,
mean, I've been to Germany, and it's like I stayed with a family with a host family while I was there, and
mhm,
the interesting thing I found was there was really just two. There's really two, like, the mom was a teacher and the dad was a doctor. Guess who the
mhm,
primary breadwinner was?
the mother as a
Exactly.
teacher, because her pay is higher and it is actually secured by the government.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very aware of that because I do have
And I
from.
mean, I'm washing the blood. I come from a family of educators
Mhm.
myself, so.
I wouldn't say that I come from a family of educators. I will say that I have educators in my family. Um, the I can say from a different point of view, like their structure of society is different.
Oh, most definitely. Like they don't keep food really at the house, like especially for breakfast. Like they'll wake up at around 7 o'clock in the morning, go to the bakery, get all the stuff, and then they'd come home and eat together as a family. And then the kids would go off to school at 11, and everybody would go to work at around 10:30, 11 as well.
Yes, but if I say structure of society, like I haven't talked to him in a while, but I had a friend that was a carpenter, German carpenter. There, they do through their apprenticeship program, but the last year they have to go across the country using their carpentry skills to actually only provide themselves with food.
Mm.
And they can't accept the money, almost like we would say Hare Krishners having their bowl and they can only have what they have in their bowl. That is what they're allowed to do for their apprenticeship program. Now, I don't know if things have changed, but that is from a construction point of view, which is a fundamentally different approach than most everybody else's. And so when I mention things, I mention them from from a very nuanced position because we don't necessarily grasp the full concept of things. And this is why I think there is a lot of truth in the statement, heavy is the head that wears the crown. Because the nuances have to be considered because the variables change. And so if we're talking Germany versus the US, we would never allow for that to happen because people would use and abuse the carpenters,
Right.
especially.
There's a culture. There's a like there like it's a cultural yeah. There's cultural issues there.
There's a completely different cultural underpinning.
Right.
Now, here's where things get a little bit
We in
complicated.
America say we respect work, but we don't really respect work. We respect work that benefits us personally. We don't respect work ethic if it doesn't fall into our like psychological box as an individual.
I disagree with that from the work aspect. As someone who's worked 84-hour weeks
I mean,
for weeks on end,
and
and
honestly, I would defer to you on this one because you have worked like what would be considered the quintessential blue collar job.
yes, and when I say 84-hour weeks, I'm not joking. I would go in for a shutdown at some places, and I would work 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift, 7 days a week for 3 weeks, fly to another location, and do it again. Now, in expressing that, it is not the fact that we respect work that benefits us. Because work that benefits us can be done in 30 hours a week.
Mm.
What we want is we want servitude.
Mm.
So someone who will work with all that they have until they drop dead to make sure that we have what we're telling them to do. No questions asked. If I tell you to jump, you're not supposed to ask how high, you're just supposed to jump. And I can
even though asking the concept of asking how high would be is a practical question in that
yes.
analogy.
Yes, and I can say that from a point of view where there have been companies that I've worked for, even recently, where I said to them, look, you're telling me this. You're telling me to jump. And I'm going, all right, you're telling me to jump. How high do you want me to jump? And like, I'm not asking for questions. I just want you to jump. And I'm going, I need to know how high because you're not telling me how.
Because it's like you can't do your job if you don't know what the fuck you want me to do.
Yes, which that is the issue with understanding parameters.
Right.
Because if the person who is doing the job doesn't understand the parameters, then that becomes an issue for everyone else working underneath them.
Right.
And so they're like, no, like I've got tons of people that can do exactly what I say for them to do without any question. This leads us back to the issue of China. It is effective. Our U.S. economy is proof that it is effective. Go for it.
I'll pause real quick. I
Go for it.
apologize. Your audio quality is skipping a little bit. Is everything on my end? Is everything okay on yours?
Let me see.
Just double check your mic connectivity real quick.
That's what I'm doing right now. Does it sound like it's coming through now?
Yeah. Say something one more time.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Stop this for the idea that we can do something because we have enough people is not an oversimplification, but it is assuming that that is all that we need is enough people to do it.
Right.
And I can say that concerning the idea that Walmart is a distribution company with a storefront. Amazon is a distribution company with an online front. Burger King is a distribution company with a restaurant front.
Hell, McDonald's is actually the biggest. If you count McDonald's in terms of
McDonald's,
toy distributors,
yes,
they're the biggest toy distributor in the world.
7-Eleven is a distribution company with a convenience store front. This is what you start to realize is the way that they actually make money is by getting product to people. They are the quintessential middlemen. When you realize that, then we start going back to the understanding of China. The government becomes the middleman.
Interesting.
Because once they have uniformed everybody, they can actually distribute with regularity and with control.
So it's as much about it's very so that sounds like soft power to me.
It is. It is very soft power. That is the reason why it actually is breaking companies in the U.S.
Yeah.
Because if you want to do business in China, what do you have to do? You have to go through
Conform.
China. Yes, but you have to go through the Chinese government, which is the distribution to the people. So, like, it's not saying that these are all bad traits. And that's the harder part of dealing with the issue. We could say that, as a black guy, this may sound really weird coming out of my mouth, that Nazi Germany had some very great ideas.
They
They
I get
wait,
where,
wait.
I get where you're coming from in this. I'm just going to preface with this. I get where you're coming from in terms of this, but tread
carefully. Yes,
tread very carefully.
And I am, and that's why I wanted to say the reason to say that there. Anything that may have good implementation of certain ideals, of certain designs for their public, may in some cases be good. The problem is that in assuming that, you don't assume the nuances that can immediately turn it to a bad thing.
Exactly.
And that's part of what we are dealing with here in the US, is because we have a system that can be a very good system. China has a system that can be a good system. But it is not the system that is generally the issue.
It is the people
and the
using the system.
And the implementation.
Well, the same problem with, people say, like, the problem of everything is government. I'm like, well, the same problem with government is the same problem that liberals will like myself will have with big corporations. It's the fact that at the end of the day, a government and a big business are essentially the same thing. It's just a lot of people working towards a single goal. It's just that single goal is different. On the government side, it's a lot of people work towards serving the public. That is their goal, is to serve the public and the constituents. The purpose of a corporation is to service its bottom line.
I will disagree with what you're saying, only because you're stating it in a way that's a fact.
I'm not stating it.
No.
Certainly on the government side, that's a lot more fluid. But a corporation's purpose is to make money, providing services that the market deems valuable.
Yes, I will agree with that. My statement was more towards the government side.
Right. But that's how it's supposed to work in theory.
It's
theory.
In theory, yes, but in theory, no. Or in practicality, no as well, even on the business side. And I would like to throw it a different way. Yes, I grew up very religious. Just saying that I did. The idea of church.
Or are you still religious?
I do have my personal religious beliefs, yes, but I do not feel
not salacious about it.
Well, my first thought is that whatever rules that I abide by, that I believe that God or whatever somebody else may consider as God as entity wants me to follow, they're the rules that apply to me because I claim to be following. They're not the rules of someone else who does not claim to follow.
Mm.
So I cannot impose my rules that I follow on somebody else because that is not their decision to follow.
Interesting.
And so they're personable to me. And if they're like, hey, I see you doing that over there, and it seems to work for you, like how? Then I can say, hey, I have these set of rules that I follow that make it work for me. If you want to do it the way that I'm doing it, you'd have to kind of follow these rules. If you want to try, that's all well and good, up to you. Test it and see if it works. If it doesn't, make your own decision.
Exactly.
Because it's not for me to tell you how to live your life or to expect you to live your life. It's my rules. Like, I follow them. That doesn't mean that you have to follow them. It would almost be like saying the dietary chart for every racial breakdown. It is, I forget what the amount of sodium is per day that's allowed, except for one. African Americans are supposed to have 1,500 milligrams of sodium a day as their maximum. Everyone else's is higher than that. Now, that is a rule that is personable to me, but it is not necessarily purposeful to somebody else.
Well, I mean, the dietary, the like, it's part of the reason why certain people, depending on their ethnic background, are able to become vegans significantly easier than others. Like me, you and I would have a harder time because I'm northeast. My family's from northeastern Europe, so it's like cutting out meat is really hard for someone like me.
Yes, but as a, like, because I happen to be an ovo-lacto vegetarian, even as a black person in the South, that is a very hard thing to do as well, because that is ingrained in the culture. And like, you don't even eat fish? No, I'm not a pescatarian. No fish? Like, none? No.
I mean, I don't blame you. I'm not a gigantic fish myself, to be honest.
But what I'm saying is, like, this is a question that I get from those that are. And so those are personal rules to myself. But that doesn't mean that I won't say to somebody, hey, if you're going to go out and get a burger, make sure, like, you might try Five Guys because, like, they do their burgers well done.
Yeah, Five Guys burgers are the shit, man. For real. It's like,
but they're well done burgers, whereas most everybody else doesn't necessarily do their burgers well done.
Right. So it's like when you eat the well done burger, it's like it's arguably healthier, even though it's all greasy, because you're not don't have that risk of.
And so this is true, and that's me saying, hey, look, I may not partake in this, but because I realize that good food and good quality food is something that I wish you good health. So if you're going to go about doing this, here's options that you can take that reduce your risk a little bit. If you want to go sit down and have a steak, make sure you go get a good, well done steak. Some people like theirs medium rare. I get that. Like, that's your taste preference, but that doesn't mean that you don't run some risk. And me saying that, some people are like, isn't that kind of against what you are?
No, just because, like, I just for clarity, I myself am an atheist. I haven't believed in God. I haven't I didn't know that I haven't believed in God since the age of 8,
That's hard.
and I only started identifying as an atheist at age 13 because I finally learned what the word I was for what
Okay.
it was, you know. But since I've been out on my own and started running a business, I've stopped being an anti-theist. You know,
Okay.
I stopped. I'm not. I don't degrade religion. I think I criticize. I think I crit. I like. I the furthest I'll go really now is criticizing the fetishization of faith
Yes.
in government and stuff like that. Where I'm just like, needs to be a separation of church and state, and there are times where I just do not see that.
And I will 100% agree with you on that.
But
And
I
from
will say
go ahead.
Target.
Mhm.
I don't know about you,
Mhm.
but I have had a blast with this.
Okay, and you probably need to start wrapping things up a little bit.
Right. Because I that being
That's
said,
fine.
I most certainly want to have you on again. Because
That's fine.
you're a joy to just listen to just talk.
Understood. And
So
that's not a problem.
yeah.
What I
So
will
let's
what I will end with then, because that way I can tie up
finish your
some of
thought.
the
Yeah.
tie up some of the loose ends. So, church is one of the ways in which you socially adapt people to being a certain way
Mm-hmm.
that you cause uniformity.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Blizzard has an issue with being in China. They do have different religious beliefs. They do have different ways in which they go about doing stuff. I cannot force my opinion on the Chinese. I,
True.
I cannot, I do not wish for them to force their opinion on me.
Right.
Now, Blizzard finds themselves in a pickle. Or Activision Blizzard finds themselves in a pickle
They want to have their
because
cake and eat it too.
they want to have their cake and eat it too. Like all the different things that I've expressed all have impacts because they're nuances of the situation in various different degrees. How culture works, how government works, how people actually implement those cultures and governments. These are things that we're still dealing with now and today. It doesn't mean that I'm right and they're wrong. It doesn't mean that they're right and I'm wrong.
Right.
What it means is that the company has some very big issues that they now have to deal with.
No,
I can talk about the human rights violations that China has, but then I also have to turn around and say the United States has some human rights violations going on right now on the border.
Yep, nobody's perfect. I mean, those camps we don't have time to get into them, but
Yes,
we certainly can talk about it at a later date.
that's fine. And all I'm saying is, for me to point the finger across the water,
It's hypocritical.
I have three fingers pointing back at myself, and the best thing that I can do first is deal with what I have at home. And if I can't support somebody else who's doing something else abroad that I don't agree with, then I lay down my reasoning and say, hey, I don't think that's the way I want to go, and I'm trying to do some things here at home to actually prevent the same issues because I don't think that's right. But that's me. And this is my home. This is my space. But if that's what you decide to go and do over there, you are welcome to go and do it over there.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't do it over here.
Right.
And
So,
I know you got to get going and have a good one.
no. I just wanted to know before I don't have the last thing I
Okay.
want to do beforehand is I want you to be able to plug all your stuff on YouTube and stuff and have all that. And I know you're going to send it all to me as well, so I can put it in the description. But I want to have it in verbal format, and I would like to plug a couple of my things too for your streaming audience.
That's fine. And as I said, unfortunately, while I've been on here, like I have not been able to stream because there has been a recording error from the time that I've kicked off, and I've been actually searching to figure out what may be going on because I did notice that the top thing changed after NVIDIA took over, and
It's
so
okay. We can do. Once you figure it out, we can do this again some other time.
that's fine. But yeah, anytime that you want to
I'll
sit
let
down
you know,
and
man.
go
I'll
ahead.
let you know.
Not a
So you
problem.
got Instagram, Facebook page, YouTube, Twitch. Just lay it all out, just verbally, and I'll also put it in the description down below for our lovely viewers.
Easiest way is just look for Target the Tank. It is the same on all of those platforms. I do have a Patreon page that I haven't completely set up yet, but it is there. Target the Tank on YouTube, Target the Tank on Twitch, Target the Tank on Twitter, and I do actually have an Instagram. But generally, most of the time, you'll find me on Twitch and occasionally on Twitter, and I'll be putting up more stuff on YouTube as time goes on and moves forward.
Definitely. And for those of you for those of you listening, I highly suggest going to go watch him. I played with this man in the dungeon where it was a veteran beating our heads against the wall over and over against these bosses. I tell you, this man, along with a lovely little healer that I know,
Yes,
got us through.
she did all that she could, and it was great.
Hey, and she's awesome because she has cerebral palsy. She plays with one hand. Yeah, she's that good too, huh?
Yes, she's that
So,
good.
yeah, she's fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the High Soapbox. Target, thank you so much for coming.
Not a problem. Thank you for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will see you guys in the next one. Have a good day.